Welcome back. Glad you're back. And we've been sorting through some really important issues. Important issues no matter what day you live in, but especially given the day that we live in. What we've been wrestling with specifically is how does Christianity equip you to deal with suffering? Now, this could be individual suffering like cancer or a car wreck or a job loss, or it could be global suffering, world hunger, or, hypothetically speaking, say you live in the middle of a pandemic. What does Christianity have to say to that? Because what we've seen is that a lot of religions, a lot of worldviews don't give you the power to live in the middle of suffering, don't give you the perspective that you need. But what we've said, and I think is what's true, is that if a worldview or religion can't equip you to deal with suffering and do it well, and to equip you to live a life with meaning, purpose, joy in the middle of suffering, then it really doesn't have any credibility, because that is our experience. We live in a messed up world. So I just want to revisit some of the things that we've talked about, but let me start with this. It's an article from 2002 in the New York Times, and it was following on the sniper attacks, what we know as the Beltway sniper or the DC sniper. I don't know if you remember it, or maybe you weren't even really paying attention back then, but there were people who were being shot by a sniper for no real reason. I mean, they couldn't figure out any sort of pattern to it. It just show up at different places in the Washington, D.C. area and shoot and kill people. Now, they eventually find these two guys that had teamed up to do this, but for a long time, people lived in fear. Sometimes it happened on the highway. Sometimes it happened at a gas station or a grocery store parking lot. And a woman named Ann Patchett wrote in the New York Times in a column there, something I just want to read. It said, "We're always trying to make some sort of sense out of murder in order to keep it safely at bay. I don't fit the description. I don't live in that town. I would never go to that kind of place. I don't know that kind of person." But what happens when we can't do that anymore? So this speaks back to the control issue. We always try to explain why suffering, in this case, a shooting and a murder, would happen to someone else, and how it's not going to happen to us because we're going to control it. We're going to be good people. We're going to avoid certain areas. So we try to control death. We exercise. We check our cholesterol. We have mammograms, prostate checks. But a sniper taking a single clean shot, not into a crowd, but through the sight, reminds us horribly of death itself. Despite our best intentions, it is still for the most part random, and it is absolutely coming. So what she's saying there is that one of the reasons that people feared the Beltway sniper is because it was so random. And she said that we try to control our life, cholesterol checks, prostate screenings, those kind of things, to try to bring order to it. But she says at the end, death is still random. It's coming from all of us, and it's still random. And I think the biblical perspective is entirely different than that. I interviewed a man on our podcast, 10-Minute Bible Talks. I interviewed him a couple weeks ago. His name's John Draghi. He's a pastor in town with brain cancer. And he said, I am not in the grip of cancer. Now, this man has a really advanced form of brain cancer. Barring a miracle or God's intervention, he's going to die soon. But he said, my life's not in the grip of cancer. In other words, what he's saying is my life is in God's hands. And whatever cancer is happening, that's under God's control. So we do not live at the mercy of random events. It's just not true. It's not biblical. It's not real. Everything that comes into our life, it might seem random to us, but it's not. It comes from the hand of a loving God. And he's got a plan for us in the middle of all this. But in order to get it, in order to grasp what God's doing, in order to see it from his perspective, in order to stay poised and calm like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego earlier in the week, we got to have God's perspective. We've got to have where we fit in this bigger story of what God's doing in our life. So 2 Corinthians 4:17, the Apostle Paul says, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all." Now, if you know Paul's life, the guy who wrote this, you know that his troubles were anything but light and momentary. And I know your troubles don't feel light and momentary to you right now. But his point is that compared to the glory of God that waits for us, every hardship, every trial, no matter how serious it is in this world, is light and momentary compared to the reward, compared to the glory, compared to being with Jesus. So what's God doing in those light and momentary troubles? Well, I think he's shaping us. He's molding us. He's making this the people he wants us to be, people who depend on him, people who have our idols stripped away, people who realize what's really important in life. That's what he's doing. Jonathan Haidt, who's an atheist, but I think an atheist is very friendly to faith, super intelligent guy, written a lot of great books. Happiness Hypotheses is one. Coddling of the American Mind is another. If you read Jonathan Haidt, you'll always come away smarter, but he comes from a completely different perspective, and I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, wrong perspective. But he offers a lot of insight and help in all parts of our life. And so one of the things he says, here's how he says it. He says, imagine that you can see your child's life right before they're born. Someone hands you a list of all the things that will go on in their life, and you get a couple minutes to erase anything you want. So you see on that list the good things and the bad things that come to every life. Maybe you see a divorce. Maybe you see a job loss. Maybe you see a cut from the sports team. There's a lot of different things that happen in life that we wish wouldn't. And they are right there mingled with all the blessings and joys and happiness that life has to offer. But Haidt says, if you had a eraser and you could erase any part of the list of things that will happen to your child, all of us, all parents would be tempted to erase the hardships. But his point is, this atheist again, his point is that it's in those hardships that we are shaped and molded, where we learn the most important things in life, where we learn what's important in life, where we're kind of what God would say in the refiner's fire, becoming the right kind of people. And if you take those hardships away in our life, it's not going to go well for us. But in order to say that, you've got to have some bigger perspective. Like Paul said, that our light and momentary troubles are not worth comparing to the glory that will eventually be revealed to us. So we can submit to the hardships of this life, knowing that God is using them and that God has a plan. See, that's what all this comes down to, doesn't it? It just comes down to whether you and I are willing to surrender to God, submit to God. If we believe, like we said a couple days ago, that He is better than life itself. If we're willing to pray like Jesus did, not my will, but thy will be done. Or if we think we know what's best, and we're gonna have our life planned out and take control of it, and if it doesn't go well, we're gonna be upset and angry. Or fearful and scared because we think we might lose the thing we need. But when we realize that the thing we really need is Jesus, and that he's never leaving us or forsaking us, when we realize that God is in control, that God knows what's best, that God is in this with us, that he suffers with us, that he never leaves us, he never forsakes us, we can surrender to him. He's the one who died for us, and yet he's the one who sits on his throne in heaven. Well, then it just kind of frees us from fear and worry and panic. And we can walk through life, love God, love others, step out in faith and serve, help others when we can. We're part of a bigger story. Our life doesn't end here. Now, that's what Paul's saying. The troubles we have in life, they're light and momentary, because of what they're compared to, because of the future, because the best in our life is yet to come. The best is yet to come, because the best is being in the presence of Jesus. Surrender to God. Pray to him, maybe even right now, God, I want your will, no matter what it is, I want your will. God, free me from worry by giving me a confidence, not in myself or in circumstances, but in you and you alone. You are my God. You are my hope. You are my rock. You are my shield. You're everything to me. And you're everything I want. And you're everything I need. Thanks for joining us. Take care.